This is Into the Singleverse with Raj Verma. Unfiltered conversations about the latest trends and the tangible effects of real-time data on pivotal industries, our daily lives, and the future of our world.
I'm so happy to welcome my old friend, Dr. Neha Sangwan. Neha is a speaker, a best-selling author, and a pioneer in healing burnout. She writes about it in her new book, Powered by Me, From Burnout to Fully Charged at Work and in Life, where she helps us understand how to identify and heal burnout. She's been nice enough to join us from her family vacation on Lake Como, very jealous. Neha, welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, so, one of the stories that has stuck with me was about you in your previous life as a doctor. Well, I guess you're still a doctor, but when you practiced medicine, you talk about that one incident where you did realize that there was something not quite right. Now, of course, in retrospect, you could think of it as a burnout or a near burnout. Tell us about that day, if you don't mind.
I think the most astounding thing about that day, it was June 17th, 2004. I remember it so clearly. I walked into the hospital and it was my final day on service. And what that means is, as a hospital doctor, is you not only take care of your patients that day, but you sign them out to the next doctor who will carry them on the next leg of the journey. And so that day, someone called out sick. And they also gave me what they call the Alpha Pager, which is air traffic control for the hospital, all incoming transfers. So I had 18 patients, and by 11 a.m., I had seen 2 of them because that pager kept going off for me. So I think I was really on overload. And I turned to the nurse and I said, Nina, can you please get me 40 milliequivalents of IV potassium for the gentleman in 636. And she looked at me and she said, Dr. Sangwan, are you okay? And that was my first indication that I might not be. And I said, what do you mean by that? And she said, that is the 4th time in under 5 minutes you've asked me the same question, and I've answered you every time. And I had no awareness that this was happening. And so what stunned me more than anything is that I had clearly not become unable to function. As a physician, I just walked to the bathroom, pulled out my phone and my hospital phone, called a colleague, it was a psychiatric colleague, and I just said, when can I come and see you? And he said, oh, Neha, so nice to hear from you. How about 5 o'clock today? I'll see you at the end of the day. And I looked in the mirror and I just saw how pale my face was. And I said, how about now? And we know with each other that we don't call emergencies for each other. In fact, it's a badge of honor for us to act like we can wait as long as you'd like us to wait. So the fact that I said, how about now? He said, oh, come over right now. I'll clear my calendar. And an hour or 2 later, I was standing in line with medical leave for stress and standing in line to get my prescription for Prozac. And I didn't really understand what was happening. You know, after he spoke to me, he asked me many questions. He said to me, so Neha, I'm going to put you on medical leave and I'm going to write you a prescription for some antidepressants. I had no awareness that I would need antidepressants or that my behavior was so dulled. I think it was something that just happened gradually over time, where I kept pushing myself and pushing myself and pushing myself further and further in the name of helping other people, that other people had to tell me that I was burned out, the nurse, the psychiatrist. And so when he said he would put me on stress leave, I said, oh, I can't go on stress leave. I've got 16 more patients to see. And this is the moment I really knew something was wrong. He said to me, oh, Neha, those patients will be seen, just not by you. And so there were a few moments in that day that really stunned me. And I remember driving home that day. I'm not sure I should have been driving home, but I was driving home that day and I looked over at the bottle, the prescription that was sitting on the passenger seat. And I thought to myself, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I'm pretty sure it's not a Prozac deficiency. And that was the last thing I remember about that day. And so when I went home, I put that bottle in my top drawer of my dresser in case there came a day that I would need it. Now, this is the problem with treating doctors, right? We start to treat ourselves. So I filled the prescription, but I never took it because all of the side effects of antidepressants started flashing before me. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want those. Let me first see if he can help me with our weekly sessions. I'll try and do this naturally. And if that doesn't work, I'll have this waiting for me. So that's really that day. And it took me almost a month of being off for the symptoms of throat constriction, of headaches, of insomnia to subside. And about week 5 was when I remember thinking like, oh, I'm starting to be able to relax. And I think that was more than 2 decades of education and training that got me there.
That's fascinating. Something that you and I talk about a lot is our upbringing a little bit, right? You are the middle child of three girls, Indian origin. How much do you think the upbringing had to do with you overtaxing yourself to make the people around you, quote unquote, proud?
I am such a people pleaser. When I go into organizations and I work with teams, I ask some questions sometimes about their upbringing. What rank order are you in the family? And tell me a little bit about what it was like around your dinner table. And it's funny because executives will say to me, is this therapy? Like, what are we doing here? And why does my upbringing have anything to do with how I'm leading? And I say to them in those moments, your upbringing is affecting the way you lead as much as your wardrobe influenced what you're wearing today. So what's in your wardrobe certainly influences what you choose. And so does your upbringing. And I would say it has a huge, huge influence. So when I was young, Raj, I was sent away to live with my grandparents from 3 months old to 2 years old. My grandfather got stationed in Africa with the United Nations. And so my grandmother took me with her, and we went there for nearly 2 years. And, in an Indian family, they think nothing of passing children around to extended family. It's like, oh yeah, you can so-and-so go live with your aunt in the village, go stay here with so-and-so's cousin. Everybody kind of, doesn't really think about it. And, my Nani was my grandmother, which I affectionately refer to as Nani. She was taking care of me even here in the US. So my mom didn't really think anything of sending me with her. She's the one who spends all day with me. But at 2 years old, when my parents came to pick me up, I think that break in now who I thought were my parents, me leaving them to come home to my regular family, right? My older sister, who was 18 months older than me, and certainly did not get a baby sister who she could, control, play with, whatever. She got a 2-year-old who thought she was an only child. And I don't think she was ready to share my parents' love with me either. And so when I came back, I was devastated. And, my family tells me I cried for 26 days straight. I wouldn't call my dad, Dad. I would only call him, hey, you. Hey, you, I need potty. Hey, you, I need to go to the bathroom. I need to eat. I need to, whatever. I would just call him, hey, you. So he took 2 weeks off of work. And finally, I started saying, fine, uncle. I mean, what 2-year-old does that? So I think I think I was stubborn young. And finally, I did start calling him Dad. But those stories that are told to me tell me how much it affected me. But once I realized no matter how much I cried or what I did, I wasn't going to get to go back to my Nani and Nana, I think there was a surrender that happened in me that was for survival. And I think I switched into the mode of being very externally focused and making sure I pleased everyone around me.
Or else you'd be sent to Africa?
Or I'd be sent away again. Or I'd be like, I didn't know why this all happened to me, right? I was barely speaking. My mom actually said I spoke 3 languages. She said, you know how I knew you were going to be academically inclined? She said, when I met you, there were servants, where my grandparents were that were helping us with the house. And I spoke Swahili to them. I spoke Hindi to my grandparents and my mom. And I spoke English to my sister Ritu. And my mom said, I've never seen anything like this. You're 2 years old. You know who to speak what language to, and you're fluently speaking it. So I think there was a level, when you're young, it's quite easy to pick up these languages and you absorb it quite quickly. But when I came here after that trauma, it's really what I refer to it as. I mean, leaving who you think your parents are and coming to another family in another foreign environment. I think the way that I adjusted, and I believe we all do this, we adjust to things in our lives. We're very creative about it. And me making sure that I scanned the environment, knew what everybody wanted from me, and did whatever it was to make sure that I would never be sent away again. I didn't understand it at the time, but wow, what a strategy. Because if you're in an Indian family, boy, it's academics and athletics. I became a tennis player. Math and science were my thing. And ever since I can remember, I remember people looking down at me, right? Bending over me saying, Neha, are you going to be an engineer or a doctor? And so I grew up honestly believing that there were only 2 choices. I think that it absolutely has a big impact. I overheard my dad one day talking to a friend, and he said, even the second one was a girl. All I've ever wanted was a son. And I was quite young, and I was outside his office, and I heard him saying this. And, parents, we do the best we know how, right? And we're human. I think what we say and how we show up impacts our children in ways that we don't even know. My dad never knew I heard that. I heard him saying it. And from then on, Saturday mornings, I played tennis. I was going to be an engineer. I became a mechanical and biomedical engineer. I heard my mom saying that her parents never allowed her to be a doctor, and she really wished that I would be. And someday, maybe if I went to medical school, she would go back and do it, with me. And so as soon as I realized that neither of these were not mutually exclusive, I could do engineering and then I could go to medical school. Boy, the next 25 years of my life were set up for me.
You became an engineer, you became a doctor, and all of that was to please mom and dad?
I remember one day I came home from school and I was fascinated. When you have a great teacher who inspires you in a subject, you think to yourself, I'm in 10th grade, and I came home and I said, Dad, I think I want to be an accountant. I love Mr. Russo. He's so fun. He's taught me all these cool ways that everything adds up and you can figure out how businesses work. And my dad just put his arm around me and he said, oh no, Neha, you're not going to be an accountant. Accountants, play with numbers. Like, you're going to be an engineer. I absolutely, along the way, had thoughts to do something else that never really panned out or came through, because there's no way I was going to disappoint my dad. There was no way I was going to be the one to deviate. There was a time in my life after I got really exhausted and it just all felt like too much, that I started to blame my parents. Like, I can't believe you made me do this. And a really wise coach in my life said to me, did they really make you do this? Who filled out the applications? Who took the night calls? Who did all of the problem sets? Were your parents the one who made you do this? And in that moment, I really realized that there was something I wanted more, that I chose to do this. And it was their love and approval. That I wanted their love and approval and to belong more than anything.
That's exactly where I was going. Isn't that a sort of pattern that tends to continue? And by the way, I'm being open, risking, and vulnerable here because your story resonates very well with me as well. Well, I was in the middle child. I am the only child, at least the last time I checked. Uh, and, it was just the sense of belonging and making your parents feel like they had risen up the totem pole of society and raised a really good kid by the definitions of society, who was well behaved, an engineer or a doctor. And that pattern of pleasing people to want to belong in an environment or in a particular setup. Do you think there is a pattern that continues, or do you think it's only when you are a child and when you grow up, quote unquote, you, or at least have more direct influence on your free will, that pattern does break?
Well, I think that's dependent, Raj, on how much of your own reflection that you do, how much work you do on yourself to illuminate what's driving those patterns. I think I would have continued the same patterns into my romantic relationships, into how I parent, into my work life. I would have absolutely continued all of those if I hadn't slowed down in order to see these patterns and then consciously make an effort to change them. And so I think a lot of what people struggle with are these patterns that were formed, strategies that were formed to kind of survive certain environments. And then when they leave those environments, they continue behaving in ways that protect them, just like they did in other environments, but they're not useful in this new environment of work, this new environment of the family that you have built or you have created. But when we continue those same patterns, we get very loud messages from the people around us that that's not working. That doesn't work for them, right? But we don't know a different way because that's all we've seen modeled. That's all we knew. We thought that was exactly the way it was done. So I think it's dependent on how much people invest in their own leadership development, their own awareness, their own, highlighting blind spots and patterns, how open you are to feedback.
But Neha, feedback's always hard. It's unless you have a reason to think that you got to get better, you never really break that pattern. And, you and I have seen a lot of people who have had the same life that you and I had. I think of you as having broken that pattern. To a certain extent, I think I, at least to a certain extent, break that pattern. But majority of the people who grew up with us still remain in that pattern. And I think where I'm going with this is that pattern then is always to say that we are fine. Everything is okay. To see giving up because of stress as a sign of weakness or letting someone down or not belonging to a cohort of courageous, brave, tenacious people around us, right? That we saw in our child's mind as role models. How much of that do you think we carry in our proverbial backpack as we wander through life?
So I spent the early years of my life in a hospital with people who had had heart attacks, strokes, and pneumonias. And I learned from speaking to them that they had tried to carry the weight for way too long. And when I went on stress leave, I started researching, what causes us to fall ill. And stress causes or exacerbates more than 80% of all illness. And when I realized that human beings are resilient. They can come up, they're creative, they're resilient, they're innovative. They care deeply about what other people think and upholding their image to the world, being a success, following the faster is better, do more with less, profit over people. Like, there's all these things in society. There's these rules. If you make money, if you live in this house, if you drive this car, if, your child goes to this Ivy League school, whatever it is that you grew up thinking was amazing and equaled success. You're right that I think many people don't go down the path of self-reflection, of learning, of developing themselves as a leader and a human. I have to say, I also don't know how happy they are. I met many of them in the hospital, and I made the connection between their inability to communicate with themselves and other people and their physical health. And I think in the end, really the amount of stress. So let's say you and I have a conflict. If you and I have a conflict and I avoid it, I won't talk about it. I'm just going to be polite because I was taught to be polite in my family. A conflict that would be between you and I, now I swallow. It doesn't go away by me not addressing it. Literally what happens is it just changes location. It's not between us anymore. It's within me. And every time I see you at a party, at an event, at work, your name comes up on my phone, my email, it just gives me like a, why didn't I have that conversation? Why didn't I say it? Oh, I can't stand this. It actually becomes a conflict within me. And so I think people are using all sorts of mechanisms, whether it's, sugar, caffeine, wine, drugs, alcohol, anything, right? Binging on the internet, social media, I don't know what it is. We've got a lot of strategies to kind of avoid how we actually feel inside. And when I meet patients in the hospital, when I talk to them about getting cancer, about heart attacks, strokes, pneumonias, all these things, when I ask them something I call the awareness prescription, and it helps them get to the root of their stress. And so if you don't go on this journey to learn about yourself, you're going to be making the same mistakes over and over again. You're not going to understand why things in a certain area don't work out for you. And I think in itself, like that is the stress, unless someone just says, oh, I don't care, like I'm fine. But most of us want to get better, want to improve ourselves. And what I've found is when I have conversations with those patients, every one of them, once we've gotten them physically stable, knows why they got sick, knows what the stress is, knows what they need to do to get better. So if there's anybody out there and you're feeling stuck, right, or you have a health ailment, it's really not even just for a health ailment. You can do this for any kind of situation, a business situation, a personal situation, or a health dilemma. So the awareness prescription, I started by asking these patients, why this? Why a heart attack? Why did that part of your body break down? Why not your liver? Why not your left leg? Give me the significance of why this part of your body broke down. Then I asked them question 2, why now? Why not 3 weeks ago? Why not 2 years from now? What was the message that your body needed you to get in this moment such that it had to stop you in your tracks? Question number 3, since hindsight's 2020, tell me what symptoms, signals, patterns you might have missed along the way that now make perfect sense. Question number 4, what else in your life needs to be healed? And question number 5, if you spoke from the heart, what would you say to me? Every patient I asked knew exactly what was ailing them. And then I helped them. I gave them resources and I helped them figure out how to get to the root of healing their stress. And they would write me, months later and say things to me like, Doc, I can sleep all the way through the night now. Or, you're never going to believe this. I only am using half of my anxiety medication now. My migraines went away. And when I started hearing all of this, the connection between stress and our physical ailments became very clear. And so I think a lot is going on in the world that people don't realize is connected. I think they don't realize that their physical health is connected to their mental, emotional, social, spiritual health and happiness. They just think all of these things are separate. And once I realized the interconnectedness, it became very clear to me that my job was to help people understand how their ability to communicate with themselves and each other.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for being so open and vulnerable, Neha. And we have so much to get to, but we have to stop here. Coming up in the second part of my conversation with Dr. Neha Sangwan, the author of the new book, Powered by Me, From Burned Out to Fully Charged at Work and in Life, Neha shares advice for setting boundaries at home and at the office.
So there's too rigid, too porous, and just right. And what I would say is you, of course, can let people know you want to be able to draw healthy boundaries. And those are boundaries that come with compassion.
This was Into the Singleverse with Raj Verma. If you want to learn how to unleash the immense power of data, go to singlestore.com. Into the Singleverse is a production of Forbes Books.